everybody. It's great to be in Seoul again. My name is Uriel. I'm one of the co-founders of Orbs. Orbs is a public blockchain for mainstream applications. We are the first public blockchain in the world to use ERC20 on Ethereum as our mainnet token. We were also the first public blockchains in the world that is proof of stake based, and we do the voting on Ethereum. So exactly to solve the problems that Joe Lubin explained with EOS. So I completely agree with Joe Lubin that Ethereum has won the race for base layer of trust, and I think that together with upper layer protocols, such as Orbs, we can reach mainstream faster and stronger. But today, I don't want to talk about Orbs. I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about the promise of blockchain. Many people explain how to build a blockchain with scalability, interoperability, layer one, layer two. But if we ask ourselves, why blockchain? What can we do with this technology in our everyday life? What is the use case? This basic question is still very, very hard to answer. So many people say that blockchain is the new internet, Web 3.0. It's a new internet of decentralized internet, where applications are completely decentralized and where users control their destiny, they control their money, their data, everything. And there's no centralized authorities. There's no banks, no Facebooks, no Googles. I think this vision is very interesting, and it is also a very interesting ideology. But I would like to offer a different perspective, maybe a different ideas what blockchain is and how it can reach mainstream and affect our lives. I don't think blockchain is the next internet. I think blockchain is the next generation of open source. And in order to understand this, let's go a little bit into the history of open source. So open source didn't start from open source. It started actually from the free software movement back in 1983. It was a very ideological movement that basically said, we think all software in the world should be free, all of it, because then people can use it, and developers can use it, and researchers can use it, and we can make the world a better place. But, so they went out and created the GNU license that basically said, if you used free software, your entire software needs to be free. And this sounds a little bit like Web3, complete decentralization. But this wasn't a success. For almost 20 years, businesses didn't understand the logic behind making their entire software free. Software was their IP. They made money out of it. Why should we make everything free? So the biggest companies in the world just didn't understand the value. And then in 1998, the open source movement was born. And these guys said, listen, we agree with the ideology, we understand it, but we also need to be practical. We don't really think all software needs to be free. You can use open source, but you can still use your IP alongside it. So they came up with other licenses, such as the MIT license, which is very permissive. You can use open source, but you can also use your proprietary software. And suddenly, not suddenly, 20 years later, 57% of all code in the world became open source. So this became a huge success, combining ideology and practicality. 57% of all code is open source. And what's more important is that the biggest companies in the world, they are the biggest drivers of open source in the world, while they were completely against free software before. Facebook is doing open source, React, Google is doing open source, Microsoft, all the biggest companies in the world. And they don't do open source because they are nice, because they are philanthropists. The biggest companies in the world, they do open source because it makes them more competitive, it makes them more successful. And let's take one example. If we take Android by Google, Google lost the race for mobile to Apple. And they came up with the Android open source strategy. In very few years, Android completely surpassed Apple and became 75% of all the mobiles, operating system of mobiles in the world. So Google gave up on the IP. They made Android completely open source, but what did they get? They get distribution, they got data, they got brand awareness, and they also got new business models, such as the second biggest app store in the world, Google Play. So the conclusion is that the biggest companies in the world, they do open source because it makes them more competitive. And it also makes the world a better place. Everybody can use Android now to fork it and do whatever you want. So we think that blockchain is the next generation of this. And if we can explain, if we can educate, if we can teach mainstream companies, existing companies, not decentralized applications, existing companies, how they can leverage the power of blockchain to create use cases that are more open and more collaborative, but by that become more competitive and more successful, we think this is the path of how blockchain technology will reach the mainstream. So what is blockchain for us? The goal for blockchain for us is not to focus mainly on decentralization. Our definition of blockchain is infrastructure that enables you to build applications that are more open and provide simple guarantees to the stakeholders, to the users. And we think that if mainstream companies will use these concepts of open applications, they will become more competitive and also better. So what are these three guarantees? Blockchain, in our opinion, provide three simple open guarantees: auditability, forkability, and governance. Auditability is basically transparency, to understand what is going on in the background, what is going on under the hood, how is the algorithm working. This is a very simple guarantee. If you have one exchange that basically says, I'm closed, you cannot know everything, you don't know if it's front-running, you don't know if it's fair, you don't know anything. Imagine exactly the same exchange, but this time he gives you the guarantee of auditability, transparency. You can see if there is front-running, you can see the book. Which exchange would you use? The open one, and it doesn't need to be decentralized, it needs to be open. The second guarantee is forkability. Forkability basically means that you have the ability, if you're not happy with how the system is run, you have the ability to basically fork it, take all the information, all the data, and go do it by yourself in a better way. Forkability is a key concept in open source. It's also a key concept in open blockchain. It basically means that if you're not happy, you can just take everything and do it yourself, and it brings a true balance of power. We are very used to the concept of forking coins. We fork Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, because they thought it's better. We are very used to the idea of forking infrastructure, Ethereum, Ethereum Classic, but we think that if we bring the same guarantee to the application level, they would become more competitive, more open, and provide a better service for the users. And the last one is governance. Governance basically means the guarantee to understand how the system is governed, what are the rules, and what needs to happen in order to change the rules. So I think to conclude these very basic, ideas around open blockchain, I want to say that if you take, for example, a blockchain for 5 of the biggest telcos in the world, and they run it together, but they run it in a way that provides these open guarantees. This means that when the 6th telco will come to the blockchain, it will be transparent, so he will understand how it is running. He will be able to fork it, meaning that if he's not happy with how the system is run, it can leave it and then use it by his own or with other telco partners. And the governance will also be open. He will understand how the system is controlled, and he will not be afraid that one day it will be taken by the biggest telcos in the world. This system, this public blockchain, in our opinion, is as good and as open as a system with 5,000 nodes, a completely decentralized one. The guarantees are given, in this case, inside the telco industry. It's not open to the public, but even in a simple use cases with 5, 6, 7 nodes that provides these guarantees, we can already imagine a system that is much better than what we have today. So our vision for blockchain technology is the next generation of open source, teaching mainstream companies how with better, open, and more collaborative applications, they can actually become more competitive, more successful, and also better for their stakeholders and users. That's it. Thank you very much.